Okay, hello and welcome back. Yep, we are doing another Sunday school lesson. I'm trying out gold as a color for her. I never really wore gold before, so we'll see how well that works. Um, so, excuse me. We're gonna take a walk over in this general area. Um, so, wanted to discuss kind of two things. We're discussing the previous lesson and what we've learned for the upcoming lessons. As such, in the previous lesson, we talked about the baptism of Christ, and I'll get on the path, and kind of the things about that. Well, that's what we discussed in our lesson, and there was an interesting thing that happened was that one guy apparently had done a lot of research. One of the class members into baptisms and the types and different things, and so on and so forth. And apparently, there were a lot of different types of baptisms that could be done, that were done in different ways depending upon the situation, what was most fully needed, and so on and so forth. So, my church, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, we do baptism by immersion, and it's apparently been said that's the closest to what Christ did, and that therefore that is we feel is the best way to honor him. That's apparently the reason why we do it. Although that's not entirely accurate, since we believe in indirect revelation, so that's more the reason we were told to do it. Excuse me, kids. But apparently, Christ's baptism was a little bit different than the baptism we currently do. And I had no idea about this. So this is all according to one of the class members. So if there's anything I get wrong, yeah, sorry about that. It's going to be my fault. But according from what he said, Christ's baptism was one that was specifically designed for specifically the Messiah. No one else, no one who is not the Messiah should be baptized in this way. But apparently it was a baptism by immersion, where John lowered him into the water to be baptized, and then released him, and then Christ rose from the water by himself, which I had no idea about. I'd never even heard about this. So it you learn something new every day. That guy just walked into me. You saw it. You're my witness. So that was a really very interesting thing to learn. In our normal baptism by immersion, the person who is doing the baptizing helps the person being baptized up out of the water. It seemed interesting to me. It seemed that was like very symbolic, since Christ. The symbolism of baptism by immersion is dying, being buried. When you go down in the water, you've died and you're being buried, and then coming back out of the water symbols being resurrected, being born again. I mean, literally born again into a perfect body. And it actually kind of makes sense that Christ would be, in his baptism, he would rise himself, because that's what happened as a symbolism of his when he died and when he was resurrected. He rose himself on the third day. So I thought that was like a really cool thing about that. So, that's pretty much all I wanted to cover concerning the baptism of last week. We had a long discussion and so on, but I won't go over the same ground again as I did before. I'm going to begin into you heard nothing. I'll begin into a little bit more about the Joseph Smith translation. So, I mentioned it last time in the last Sunday school lesson. So, to give you some more details on it, Joseph Smith was inspired of God to do his own translation of the Bible, to actually translate it from direct inspiration from God. And as such, there's a lot more added to it. Stuff that had been taken away from the Bible was put back into it. Now, I recognize that not everybody is going to, have the same beliefs as I do in the church and so on. I'm just giving that to you for that information. I personally believe that That is what happened. I believe that he did translate. He was a prophet of God, and he did translate the Bible. That's my beliefs. You don't have to share them. So just putting that out there for you. So, so this next section actually really concerns the Joe Smith translation because it very much changes the actual event. It's a subtle change, but I think it's a very important change. And this is one of the reasons why I prefer the Joe Smith translation, because, certain things make a little bit more sense. So, and we're dealing with this upcoming lesson, dealing with the temptations of Christ, when he was tempted of the devil 3 times. So, in the Joe Smith translation, it appears in a few of the testimonies of the apostles. I want to say it was Mark and Luke, John and Luke. I can't remember. You'd think I would have looked these things up beforehand, but sadly did not. So, regardless, the 3 temptations. So the thing about the temptations, first one, Christ goes out into the desert. Now in the King James Version, it says he went out in the desert to be tempted of the devil. The Joe Smith translation changes that. He went out into the desert to commune with God, to communicate with God, to be alone, and to do that before his mission started. And when he was done with that, that's when the devil appeared and tempted him. With the first temptation, which was, you must be hungry. Turn these rocks into bread. We know you can do it. Yeah, go ahead. It's not a big deal. Is essentially how that temptation worked. And he wasn't, and, Christ resisted the temptation. The second temptation, in the King James Version, it says that the devil brought Christ, spirited him away up into the pinnacle of the temple. Joe Smith's translation says that the Spirit of the Lord, or the Spirit of God, brought him to the pinnacle of the temple. And then after that, the devil came to tempt him. And, he did a much more subtle temptation this time, saying, if you're really the Christ, throw yourself off this temple, and, then the angels will save you. And, of course, Christ resisted again. And the third temptation, Christ saw all the kingdoms of the world, all that stuff. And the devil showed up and offered him the entire world, if you do my bidding. Which, was really kind of an empty offer if you think about it. I mean, it really was. So, and of course he resisted this temptation yet again. Now, of all the Gospels or testimonies, however you want to refer to them as, they only list these 3 temptations, but I can't remember exactly where it is. Christ does say that he was surrounded by temptations, that he had many, many temptations of him. But these 3, before his ministry began, are the ones that are recorded and that we remember. And just on a personal level, I think they provide a very good, very valuable lesson for all of us on kind of how the devil tempts us and how we can resist these temptations. The first one being like, it's not a big deal. It's, you're hungry. You need this, so you might as well go ahead and do it. And that's kind of how we're tempted, regardless of what we're being tempted with. It's just a little thing. It really doesn't matter. Now, the second one is kind of, the challenging type temptation. That, it's very interesting when you deal with people in psychology. You'll get a lot of people who, if you ask them, to do something, they'll say absolutely not. No, they'll point blank refuse. But if you challenge them that they can't do something, they will often come back and say, oh yeah, well, I could do that, and they do it. And that's in the way of being a pretty big temptation. It's one that pushes the pride button, that we actually could do this. So why don't we do it? Why don't you prove you can do it? And we don't like to be thought of as less than we are. So that kind of challenge is, it's very likely to get us to go the wrong way temptation-wise. We'll be like, oh yeah, well I can. It's like reverse psychology. It's whatever you want to call it. That's pretty much what it is. So that's another way that the devil tempts us. And the final one where it's like, hey, I'll give you everything. If you do this, you could have everything. Now this is probably the least subtle of his temptations. But it's also a very, very effective temptation to offer people. It's like, you could have this person. You could have this, if you're attracted to this person, you could have this person. You could have this really nice car. You could do all this stuff. All you would have to do is just, do this one thing. It's not that bad, really. It's just, it's worth it, right? You're worth it, right? Aren't you worth all this stuff? And yeah, it's not subtle, but it is very effective to get us. So those are really, I think, at least for me, those are illustrations of how we can expect to be tempted within our lifetime. I don't often come out to this little island type thing. It does look quite lovely from here. So, and just to give like a real life example of this video game cost about $60. It's not a cheap. Video games aren't cheap nowadays. And for a video game this big, even though it's a few years old, still you're probably going to be spending $20, $30 for this game. And how easy it would be to just, it's like, I don't quite have the money yet, but I deserve to play this game. And so the temptation to steal it would be very, very strong. Excuse me. Very strong temptation there. And, it's not, and of course not everybody's going to go for that, but that's often how we're tempted. And it's often, little things as well. That's like, it's not a big deal. That's more or less how temptations work. So anyway, that goes my quick little talk on temptations. I think I will spin around so we can get a good view of Eevee, and just a lovely day today. Anyway, yep, that was that particular Sunday school lesson. Like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.